In a couple days, wildfire season actually begins and runs from July to October, and every year keeps us all on our toes. August and September seem to be the peak months, and the Emergency Management Division of Washington State will remind us there has been a wildfire in every month of the year at some point. If they get especially bad, even if they are hundreds of miles away, the smoke can travel a long way on the wind and stay in the air for weeks at a time. And that is not to mention the 5 active volcanoes we have in the area: Mount Baker, Glacier Peak, Mount St. Helens, Mount Adams, and the mountain herself, the beautiful Mount Rainier. The Puyallup tribe calls her Tahoma, the mother of waters. We have learned here to be a little wary of fire. As a symbol, fire is usually a frightening one. But in the Bible, it is a symbol of God's power, protection, and presence among us. Consider the story we heard about the prophet Elijah and his successor. Fire appears today in the most dramatic of ways. Elijah's protege, Elisha, has been chosen to step into his mentor's lofty shoes, and he begs to receive a double share of Elijah's spirit. Elijah says, "That is a hard thing, but if you see me as I am being taken away from you, it will be granted." Then, as they are walking and talking, a chariot of fire and horses sweep between them and take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind. It's a fabulous visual, and the fiery chariot and horses remind us of the fire that Elijah once called down on the altar when he was competing with the prophets of Baal. And what does Elisha do after witnessing this wild thing? He takes up Elijah's mantle, stood on the bank of the Jordan River, maybe in shock, maybe in grief, and then he struck the water, crying out, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" And just as it had for Moses and for Elijah, the water parted. Many of us have probably been in that mental space once or twice. Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah? Despite the miraculous thing Elisha has just witnessed, he's still grieving. His friend and mentor is gone, dead for all intents and purposes, gone from his sight. And perhaps we have been in the same place. Been in a place where we have witnessed God's power, experienced God's love, and yet still felt something else too, something like grief or anger or sadness. Where is the Lord, the God of Elisha? Even when we know the answer, we still hold on to our grief. Even when I know that God is beside and within and all around me, we still feel those powerful emotions. But no matter what we are going through and what powerful emotions we are feeling, God is always with us, whether we are noticing or not. And that is always good news. Fire appears again in today's gospel, thanks to some very relatable disciples. Jesus has been vaguely predicting his death throughout this whole chapter, and he sets out resolutely for Jerusalem. And on their way, they're going to pass through a Samaritan village. But if you recall, the Samaritans and the Jews have been arguing for many, many years about where is the appropriate place to worship. And Jesus, whose face is set toward Jerusalem, he's on his way there, is on the opposite side of that debate. And so when they come to this Samaritan village, they do not welcome him. And so the disciples' reaction is to say, Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, just like Elijah did? And it makes me have great affection for the disciples. Bless their hearts. They miss the point over and over and over. Just a couple paragraphs up, they have just finished having an argument about which of them is the greatest. And Jesus' response was to tell them to stop competing for power and to act like a little child. Let the little children come to me. Whoever is last among you will be the first. It was a lesson in gentleness and humility. And just a couple paragraphs later, the disciples run into a minor inconvenience. And their response is to say, hey, we noticed this village didn't roll out the red carpet for us. Would you like us to burn it to the ground? Just a little extreme. But maybe a human instinct, right? Come from hurt. Come from anger. We've probably all been tempted to lash out at some point against someone who has hurt us, or when we feel like we have been wronged. And that is relatable too, even if we weren't tempted to call down fire from heaven. We've all felt hurt by someone we love, or angry at other people in the world who are different from us in some way, or afraid of being abandoned, left behind, or taken advantage of. But here is some more good news. After his disciples missed the point so spectacularly, Jesus doesn't lash out at them. He doesn't punish the village for not welcoming him. He simply rebukes his disciples for their overreaction, and they move on to the next village. There's a footnote in most Bibles that will say that in some of the ancient copies of this manuscript, there's an additional line. And it tells us what Jesus said when he rebuked them. You do not know what spirit you are of, for the Son of Man has not come to destroy the lives of humans, but to save them. It's a rebuke, but it is one full of hope. Christ hasn't come to dish out punishment on our enemies or on anyone for that matter, but to save us all and give us all abundant life. That is the same spirit we have within us, a spirit to save and not to destroy. The village deciding not to welcome Jesus would have been a grave breach of hospitality in their culture. One always welcomed the stranger. If someone came to you and asked for hospitality, of course you would give it to them. And so what they've done is offensive. But Jesus doesn't call down holy fire on them, because that is not what fire from heaven is meant to do. So often we want to lash out with people who disagree with us, to hurt or discredit or punish them. And maybe like Jesus, we sometimes think Jesus might approve, just like the disciples did, and yet we are wrong. We are human, just like they were, but wrong, because this is not what the fire from heaven is for. Over and over in the scriptures we see God's holy fire is not a sign of destruction, but of God's light and power in the world. At Pentecost, the Holy Spirit came down and hovered over the disciples like tongues of flame, providing a miracle of translation and connection. And suddenly everyone could hear the good news in their own language. When the church was born, the Holy Spirit's fire didn't destroy people, but instead destroyed the barriers between them. God's fire didn't burn up the bush that Moses saw. God's fire spoke. Tomorrow I will celebrate the 5th anniversary of my ordination to the priesthood, and I am very delighted to celebrate the occasion here with all of you. I have seen at St. Anthony's Episcopal Church that spark of Holy Spirit fire, the energy you have to connect to heal, to translate, to be God's presence among each other and among your neighborhood. That is what God's holy fire is for. Not to destroy, but to connect and dream and speak God's words. So we must remember that. Remember it in times of grief, when the fire doesn't amaze you like before. And remember in times of anger, when you wish you could call on it to punish your enemies. Remember that the Holy Spirit is always there, always with you, in the best and worst moments, and all of them in between. The Holy Spirit is here upon all of you. And it doesn't just burn, it speaks. So let us all remember to listen. Amen.